My name is Fiona Callahan. I'm 31 years old. 6 months ago, I sat in my corner office on the 4th floor of a building I owned, listening to a phone recording. The voice on the recording was my mother's.
I want you to fire my daughter,
she said, calm, certain, like she was ordering coffee.
She's causing problems at work. She has no future there anyway. Honestly, you'd be doing us all a favor.
She didn't know she was talking to my business partner. She didn't know the call was being recorded. And she had absolutely no idea that the company she was calling the company she wanted to throw me out of was mine. I owned 70% of it. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to take you back. Back to a house in Portland, where I learned very early that some people in your family will smile at you while quietly making sure you never rise too high. Before I do that, if this story already has you hooked, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below. Now let me take you back to where it all started. There were 4 of us in the Callahan house on Birchwood Drive in Portland, Oregon. Dad, Paul Callahan, ran a mid-sized printing company called Callahan Press. 40 employees, decent revenue. He wore the same gray blazer to every client meeting and came home smelling like ink and coffee. He wasn't a cruel man. That was the problem. Cruel men make noise. Paul Callahan made silence. He watched things happen and chose again and again to say nothing. Mom Renee Callahan didn't work. She didn't need to. She ran the house the way a general runs a battlefield, with total authority, no tolerance for dissent, and an absolute certainty that she was always right. She had perfect nails, a spotless kitchen, and an opinion about everything except her own blind spots. Then there was Tessa, my older sister by 3 years. Tessa was the sun of our family. Everything orbited her dance recitals, her grades, her social life, her feelings. Renee scheduled her weeks around Tessa's schedule. Paul took half days off work for Tessa's school performances. The refrigerator was covered in Tessa's photos. And then there was me. I wasn't invisible in the way people sometimes mean, like I was ignored completely. I was fed, clothed, driven to school. But there is a particular kind of invisible that is harder to explain. It's being in the room and not being seen. It's being spoken about, but never spoken to. It's learning slowly and without anyone telling you directly that you are the supporting character in a story that belongs to someone else. I learned it young. Tessa was enrolled in private school, Portland Academy, $12,000 a year from the 6th grade onward. I attended Lincoln High, the public school 4 miles from our house. When I asked why, Renee said,
We have to be practical, Fiona.
That same year, she redecorated Tessa's bedroom with custom furniture from a boutique on Northwest 23rd Avenue. I counted the throw pillows on Tessa's bed once. There were 9, I had 2. One of them had a broken zipper. I don't say this to sound small. I say it because these are the kinds of details that add up. Quietly, over years. Until one day you realize you've been doing math your whole life, calculating your own worth based on how little space you were given. My thing was drawing. It started when I was 9 years old on a yellow legal pad I found in my dad's home office. I drew the house on Birchwood Drive from memory, every window, the crooked mailbox, the oak tree in the front yard. My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Patricia, saw it and told me I had a gift. I held on to those words for years. They were some of the only ones I had. By middle school, I was teaching myself graphic design on a secondhand Dell laptop that overheated if you ran more than 2 programs at once. I watched free tutorials online. I practiced for hours after homework. I designed fake logos, fake posters, fake magazine covers just to learn, just to get better. When I was 14, I asked Renee if I could take a design class at the Community Arts Center downtown. $40 for 6 weeks. She looked up from her magazine.
Art isn't a career, Fiona.
She turned the page.
Stop wasting time on things that won't pay your bills.
That same month, she paid $400 to enroll Tessa in a private tennis coaching program, a sport Tessa quit 4 weeks later. I did not take the design class. I went back to my laptop and kept teaching myself. By high school, I was good. Better than good. My art teacher, Mr. Gallagher, pulled me aside after class one afternoon in my junior year and told me about a regional student design competition hosted by the Oregon Arts Foundation. First prize was a $500 scholarship and a feature in their annual publication. I entered without telling my family. I won. They called my name. I walked to the stage. They called my name. I walked to the stage alone. I shook hands with the foundation director. Someone took my photo. I held the certificate and smiled and thought, someone sees me. Someone actually sees me. I looked out at the audience. Renee was not there. Paul was not there. Tessa was not there. They were at Tessa's regional volleyball tournament that day. Tessa's team lost in the second round. They were home by 4 in the afternoon. No one asked me how the ceremony went. I put the certificate in the bottom drawer of my desk, under some notebooks. I don't know why I hid it. Maybe because displaying it felt like asking for something I already knew I wouldn't get. 3 weeks later, Renee organized a small dinner, 8 people, her best friend Carla and her family, to celebrate Tessa being nominated for her school's student council. Nominated, not elected. There was a cake from the French bakery on Burnside Street. Renee gave a small speech about how proud she was. I sat at the end of the table and ate my food and said nothing. Paul caught my eye once across the table. Just for a second, something passed over his face. Not guilt, exactly. More like discomfort. The look of a man who knows something is wrong, but has decided a long time ago that naming it would cost too much. He looked away first. I told myself it was fine. I was used to it. I had learned by then to store the hurt in a quiet place inside me and keep moving. Keep working, keep getting better at the one thing that was truly mine. What I didn't know sitting at that dinner table watching Renee smile at Tessa watching Paul look away was that someone else in my life had been paying attention, had been watching me for years, and was already making plans. I didn't know it then, but that someone was about to change everything. I got into the University of Oregon's School of Art and Design on a merit scholarship. Full tuition, 4 years, $68,000, total covered entirely by the scholarship committee because of my portfolio and my grades. I didn't cost my parents a single dollar. I found out on a Tuesday afternoon in April of my senior year of high school. I was sitting on the floor of my bedroom when the email came through. I read it 3 times. Then I sat very still for a long moment because I didn't know what to do with good news in a house that wasn't built to hold it. I went downstairs. Renee was in the kitchen. Paul was reading the newspaper at the table. I got a full scholarship, I said, to U of O Art and Design.
That's good, Fiona.
He nodded once, then looked back down at his paper.
And make sure you have a backup plan.
She said.
Design is a competitive field. A lot of people try and don't make it.
That was it. That was the whole conversation. 2 months later, when Tessa was accepted to Portland State University. No scholarship, standard admission, a degree in communications, Renee called her sister, called her mother, called 2 friends. She bought a congratulations banner from the party store on Hawthorne Boulevard and hung it in the living room. She made Tessa's favorite dinner pot roast with mashed potatoes and homemade rolls. Paul opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving.
We're so proud of you, sweetheart.
Renee said, squeezing Tessa's hand across the table. I sat across from them and ate my pot roast and told myself it didn't matter. I almost believed it. College changed me. Not dramatically, not in the way people describe in movies where someone arrives somewhere new and immediately becomes a different person. It was quieter than that. It was the slow, steady experience of being in a room full of people who took what I did seriously. Professors who marked up my work with real feedback. Classmates who asked for my opinion. Competitions I entered and placed in. A world that operated on merit, not on who your mother preferred. I graduated 4 years later with a 3.9 GPA and a portfolio that my senior thesis advisor, Professor Lena Marsh, described in her recommendation letter as, and I remember this word for word, among the most refined and commercially viable bodies of student work I have reviewed in 22 years of teaching. My graduation ceremony was held on a Saturday morning in June at Outson Stadium in Eugene. 12,000 seats. The sun was sharp and the air smelled like cut grass. I wore my cap and gown and walked across that stage and shook the dean's hand and thought about the yellow legal pad, the secondhand Dell, the $40 design class Renee wouldn't pay for. I had done this myself. My family did not come. Renee had organized a trip to Cannon Beach that weekend, a short vacation with Tessa and 2 of Tessa's friends. A celebration for Tessa finishing her junior year. Without failing anything, as Renee put it. Paul went along because Paul always went along. I received a text from Renee at 11:47 in the morning while I was still in my cap and gown.
Congrats, honey. Call us when you're back in Portland.
Vivian came. She drove down from Seattle the night before and stayed at a hotel near campus at her own expense. She brought flowers, white peonies, my favorite, though I had never told anyone that except her. She took photographs. She bought me lunch at a restaurant on the river. She sat across from me and looked at me the way very few people ever had. Like I was worth looking at.
You did something real here, Fiona.
She said.
I need you to know that.
What you built in 4 years, that's not luck. That's not circumstance. That is entirely you.
I nodded. I was trying not to cry in public.
Your mother doesn't see it.
Vivian said quietly.
She never has. That's her failure, not yours.
I didn't know how to answer that, so I just held my flowers and watched the river and let the words settle somewhere inside me. 6 weeks after graduation, I started my first job at Meridian Creative Group, a mid-sized design studio in Portland's Pearl District. The salary was $72,000 a year, full benefits. A small but serious team of 11 designers working on brand identity projects for regional and national clients. I came home for dinner that Sunday and told my family.
Good start.
Paul said.
Meridian, is that the studio near the Whole Foods on Burnside? I pennade mig hatten alltså.
Renee tilted her head slightly. Yes. She reached for the salad bowl.
It's a small company, not much room to grow.
She passed the salad to Tessa.
Tessa, tell them about your new role.
Tessa straightened in her chair. She had just been promoted to senior coordinator at the marketing firm, where she worked a title bump with a raise that brought her salary to $51,000 a year. Renee had already texted me about it twice. For the next 20 minutes, the dinner table belonged to Tessa. Her new responsibilities, her new office, her plans. Renee asked follow-up questions with genuine enthusiasm. Paul smiled and said he was proud. Nobody asked about Meridian. Nobody asked what I would be designing or for which clients or what I was hoping to build. Nobody noted, and I did not point out that my salary was $21,000 higher than Tessa's. I ate my dinner. I drove home. I sat in my apartment on Northeast Alberta Street and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Tessa.
Hey, can you do me a favor? I have a client pitch on Thursday and my designer bailed. Nothing complicated, just a deck like 20 slides. You're good at this stuff. It would mean a lot.
I should have said no. I know that now. I knew it then on some level. But there is a particular weakness that grows in people who have spent years being told their work doesn't matter, a desperate, exhausting need to prove that it does. To be useful. To be needed even by the wrong people. I said yes. I spent 11 hours over 2 evenings building Tessa a pitch deck that was genuinely some of my best work at that point. Clean hierarchy, smart color system, motion-ready layouts. The kind of deck that makes a room pay attention. Tessa won the pitch.
Nailed it.
She texted me one word. No thank you. No credit. No mention of my name to her clients or her boss. 3 weeks later, she asked again. Different client. Bigger stakes. I said yes again. I don't know exactly when it became a pattern. Somewhere between the 3rd project and the 5th, it stopped being a favor and became an expectation. Tessa would text with a deadline. I would deliver. She would win. The world would keep turning as if I had nothing to do with any of it. And somewhere in that silence, in the space between what I built and what she claimed, something in me began to harden. I didn't recognize it yet, but it was there, small and quiet and growing, like everything I had ever built. By the end of my 2nd year at Meridian, I had helped Tessa with 11 projects. 11. I counted them in a notebook I kept in my desk drawer, not out of bitterness at first, just to keep track. Dates, project names, hours spent. The way you track anything that takes up a significant portion of your time. The total hours across those 11 projects, 134. The total amount Tessa had paid me $0. The total number of times she had mentioned my name to a client, a colleague, or her boss, 0. I knew this because I had looked. I had found her LinkedIn profile one evening and scrolled through her activity posts, shares project highlights. Every piece of work I had built for her was there presented as hers. Clean mock-ups, strong typography. The color systems I had spent hours refining. All of it living under her name, her headshot, her growing list of endorsements, from colleagues who praised her exceptional eye for design. I sat with my laptop in my apartment and read those endorsements one by one. Exceptional eye for design. I closed the laptop. I made tea. I stood at the window and watched the rain come down on Northeast Alberta Street and told myself it was fine, that it didn't matter, that I was building my own career and Tessa's borrowed reputation would eventually collapse on its own. But that night something shifted. Not dramatically. Not yet. Just a small, quiet tightening the way a rope feels just before it reaches its limit. The Christmas dinner that broke something open happened in December 2.5 years into my time at Meridian. Renee had decorated the house on Birchwood Drive elaborately that year, a 12-foot tree in the living room garland on every railing, candles in every window. She had invited 12 people, Paul's sister and her husband, 2 of Renee's friends with their families, and of course Tessa. After dinner, while everyone was still at the table with their wine and their dessert plates, Tessa announced she had something to share. She pulled out her iPad.
I've been putting together a portfolio of my recent work.
She said, propping it against the centerpiece so everyone could see.
I'm actually thinking about pitching for a larger role at the agency.
She swiped through slide after slide. I recognized every single one. The rebranding deck for the Pacific Northwest outdoor retailer I had built that in a weekend, 41 hours straight, because Tessa's deadline was Monday morning. The brand identity system for the boutique hotel group in Bend. I had redesigned their logo 3 times until Tessa said the client was happy. The campaign visuals for the organic food startup in Eugene-le-Cher. Had done those in 4 days while managing a full project load at Meridian. All of it, every pixel, built by me. Presented by her.
Tessa, you have such a gift.
Paul looked at the screen and said,
We are so proud of you, sweetheart. You've worked so hard.
Renee reached over and squeezed Tessa's hand. Tessa smiled the smile of someone who has never once questioned whether they deserve the room they're standing in. I sat at the far end of the table. No one looked at me. No one asked what I thought of Tessa's portfolio. No one registered the stillness that had come over my face. I picked up my fork and finished my dessert. I said goodnight at 9:30 and drove home in silence. In my apartment, I opened my notebook. I wrote the date. I wrote 11 projects, 134 hours, 0 credit, $0. Then I wrote one more line. This is the last time. 3 days after Christmas, Dee Vivian called. She had been at the dinner. She had sat 2 seats down from me and watched the whole thing unfold. She had said nothing at the table she knew better than to make a scene in Renee's house. But she had been watching. She had always been watching.
How are you doing?
She asked. Fine, I said, the automatic answer, the one I had been giving my whole life.
Fiona.
Her voice was gentle but direct.
I saw your face at dinner.
I didn't answer.
I've been thinking about this for a long time.
She said.
I want to have a real conversation with you, not on the phone. Can you come to Seattle this weekend? When Kitty some.
I drove up on a Saturday morning in January. Vivian lived in a quiet neighborhood in Capitol Hill, a craftsman house with a wide front porch and a garden that she maintained with the same careful attention she gave to everything in her life. She made coffee. We sat at her kitchen table. Outside, the sky was the flat gray of a Pacific Northwest winter. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a business proposal, a design studio, based in Portland. Full-service brand identity, digital design, creative direction. Vivian had already done the preliminary research market analysis startup cost projected revenue for the first 3 years. She had spoken quietly and without my knowledge to a business attorney named Derek Holt, who had experience structuring creative partnerships.
I want to invest $50,000,
Vivian said.
as seed capital. You would own 70% of the company from day one. Derek would hold the remaining 30% as managing partner, his name on the paperwork, your vision, running everything, at least for the first 3 years.
I stared at the folder. Why 3 years? I asked.
Because you need time to build without interference.
She said.
If your mother finds out you own a company before you're established enough to defend it, she will find a way to undermine it. She won't mean to destroy you. She'll just...
Vivian paused, choosing her words carefully.
She'll involve herself, and her involvement has never helped you.
I knew she was right.
There's one condition.
Vivian continued. She reached into the folder and produced a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in her handwriting.
You keep this. You don't open it until someone tries to take something from you that you built yourself. You'll know when.
I looked at the envelope for a long moment. What's inside?
Everything you'll need,
She said simply.
when the time comes.
I signed the papers that afternoon. Derek Holt drove down from Seattle 2 weeks later, and we finalized the structure at a notary's office in Portland's Lloyd District. Whitfield Creative, the studio name we chose, a nod to the design legacy I intended to build, was officially registered on a gray Tuesday in February. I told no one, not Renee, not Paul, not Tessa. I kept showing up to Meridian every morning, kept doing my work, kept being the quiet one at Sunday dinners. But something had changed. I was no longer waiting for my family to see me. I was building something they would eventually be unable to ignore. Brick by brick, client by client, late night by late night, in a studio whose address they didn't know, under a name they hadn't connected to me yet. And in my desk at home in the bottom drawer sat a sealed envelope with my name on it. I didn't know what was inside, but I knew with a certainty I couldn't explain that the day I opened it would be the day everything changed. Whitfield Creative turned 3 years old on a Tuesday in February. By that point, we had 17 employees, a 4-story building in Portland's Pearl District that we leased at $14,000 a month, and a client roster that included 2 nationally recognized retail brands, a Pacific Northwest hotel group, and a regional healthcare network whose rebrand we had completed the previous spring. Our annual revenue had crossed $1,200,000. Derek managed the operations side, payroll, contracts, vendor relationships. I ran everything creative. To the outside world, Derek Holt was the face of Whitfield Creative. To everyone who worked there, I was the reason it existed. To my family, I was still just Fiona, the quiet one, the designer at that small studio near the Whole Foods on Burnside. I had kept the secret exactly as Vivian and I had agreed. 3 years? Not a word. On Sunday dinners at the Callahan house on Birchwood Drive, I listened to Renee talk about Tessa's career and Paul's company and the neighbors and the weather. I ate my food, I drove home, I went back to work. The distance between those 2 worlds, the one my family saw and the one I was actually living, had become so wide that I sometimes sat in my corner office on the 4th floor and marveled at the fact that they were both real. Both happening simultaneously. One shrinking, one expanding, and only I could see both of them at once. The trouble started, as it so often did, with Tessa. In the spring of that 3rd year, Tessa was given the biggest opportunity of her career at the agency where she worked a full rebranding project for a mid-size outdoor apparel company based in Bend, Oregon. The contract was worth $45,000. Her agency would take a cut, but Tessa's name would be on the account. Her boss had chosen her specifically because of her portfolio. The portfolio I had built. She called me on a Wednesday evening in March. I was still at the studio reviewing layouts for a campaign due the following week. I saw her name on my phone screen and felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the one that had been there for years, the one I had learned to breathe through.
Fiona.
Her voice was bright, the particular brightness she reserved for when she wanted something.
I have the most amazing opportunity. You're gonna love this.
She explained the project, the client, the timeline, the stakes.
I need your help. Just this once. I know you're busy, but this is huge for me. If I land this account well, I'm looking at a senior director title by the end of the year.
I sat in my office chair and looked out at the Pearl District through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The evening light was turning the buildings amber. Tessa, I said, I can't keep doing this.
What do you mean?
I mean 11 projects, 134 hours, 0 credit, $0. I've been building your reputation for 3 years and you've never once acknowledged it. Another pause, longer this time.
I brought you the connections, Fiona. That should count for something. You got practice, real-world experience. I thought that was payment enough.
Practice, I repeated.
Don't make this into something it isn't. I always had to work harder for Mom's attention because of you. The least you can do is help me when I ask.
I opened my mouth, then I closed it. Because there it was, the logic that had governed our entire relationship stated plainly for the first time. Her disadvantages, imagined or real, were my debt to pay. Indefinitely. Without question, without end. I have to go, I said. Good luck with the pitch. I hung up. What happened next, I did not anticipate. 2 days later, I arrived at the studio at 8 in the morning to find Derek already at his desk with his office door open, which he only did when something needed my immediate attention. He looked up when I walked in.
I got an interesting call last night,
He said. He turned his monitor toward me. On the screen was the call log from our main studio line, the number printed on our business cards, the number listed on our website, the number on the back of the card. I kept on the kitchen counter at home when I emptied my bag on Sunday evenings before family dinners. The call had come in at 7:42 in the evening, 31 minutes after I had hung up on Tessa. Duration 6 minutes and 14 seconds.
I recorded it. I record all after-hours calls to the main line. You know that.
I knew that. It was a policy we had set up in our first year for client protection. I had never once thought about what else it might capture. Derek pressed play. The voice that came through his speakers was one I had known my entire life. Calm, precise, utterly certain of itself.
Good evening. My name is Renee Callahan. I'm calling regarding one of your employees, a young woman named Fiona Callahan. She's my daughter.
A brief pause.
I'll be direct. Fiona has been behaving inappropriately with a colleague, a married man, and it's creating serious problems for her, for your company, for our family's reputation. I think the responsible thing for everyone involved would be to let her go before this becomes a larger issue.
Another pause.
She's never been easy to manage, honestly. She's always been the difficult one in our family. You'd be doing us all a favor. I wanted you to know, as her mother, I'm trying to handle this before it gets worse.
The recording ended. 6 minutes and 14 seconds. I sat very still in the chair across from Derek's desk. The morning light was coming through the blinds in long, flat strips. Somewhere in the building below us, I could hear our team arriving keyboards, coffee machines, the low hum of a workday beginning.
Fiona.
Derek was watching me carefully. I didn't answer right away. I was listening to the echo of my mother's voice in my head. She's always been the difficult one. The same words I had heard my whole life in different forms, in different rooms at different tables. Spoken quietly enough that they could always be denied. That they could always be explained away as concern, as worry, as a mother trying to help. But this time she had said them to a stranger. This time she had said them to a recording. And this time the stranger she had called was my business partner. And the company she had called the company she wanted to strip me from. The company she believed belonged to someone else, the company she thought she could reach into and pull me out of like a splinter was mine. 70% mine. I looked at Derek. Can you send me that file? I said. My voice was very quiet.
Already in your inbox,
he said. I stood up. I walked to my office. I closed the door behind me. I sat down at my desk and looked out at Portland, the city where I had grown up invisible, where I had taught myself everything I knew on a secondhand laptop, where I had built something real and true and entirely my own. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I took out a sealed envelope with my name written on the front in Vivian's handwriting, and I opened it. The envelope contained 3 things. The first was a letter, 2 pages handwritten on Vivian's pale blue stationery, dated the same January afternoon we had signed the papers in her kitchen in Seattle. The second was a certified copy of the original incorporation documents for Whitfield Creative. My name, Fiona Callahan, listed as majority owner, 70% shareholder co-founder. Every signature, every notary stamp, every legal confirmation of what I had built. The third was a single index card, 4 sentences in Vivian's careful handwriting. You built this. It belongs to you. No one can take it. Now let them see it. I read the letter slowly. Vivian had written it the night before our meeting, before she had even told me her plan, before I had agreed to anything. She had written it because she wanted me to have something fixed and permanent to hold on to on the day the world tried to tell me I was worth less than I was. She wrote about watching me at family dinners for years. She wrote about the Christmas when I was 9, and I had drawn the house on Birchwood Drive on a yellow legal pad, and she had quietly asked if she could keep it. She still had it, framed in her hallway in Seattle. She wrote about sitting in the audience at the Oregon Arts Foundation ceremony when I was 17. She had come without telling anyone had sat in the back row, had watched me walk across that stage alone, and had made a decision that afternoon that she had spent the next several years quietly executing. She wrote, I have been introducing clients to Whitfield Creative for 2 years. Every major account, you can't explain the hotel group, the healthcare network, the retail brand from Chicago, those came through me. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything. You don't. You earned every single one of them with your work. I just opened the door. You walked through it on your own. I had to stop reading for a moment. I set the letter down on my desk. I looked out at the Pearl District. The morning had fully arrived by now, blue sky, sharp, October light the street below, busy with the ordinary momentum of a workday. I watched a woman walk her dog along the sidewalk. I watched a delivery truck double park outside the coffee shop on the corner. I watched the city move indifferent and alive, and I breathed. Then I picked up the letter and finished it. The last paragraph was short. When you're ready, you'll know what to do. You've always known. I love you, Fiona, more than you have ever been told. Vivian. I sat in my office for a long time after that. I did not cry. I had done my crying a long time ago, at 17 alone in a parked car outside the Portland Art Museum. At 22, in my cap and gown, in an empty parking lot in Eugene, reading a text that said, call us when you're back. At 25, closing my laptop on Tessa's LinkedIn endorsements in an apartment on Northeast Alberta Street at 11 o'clock at night. I had spent a long time crying in private. I was done with that. What I felt sitting in that office holding those documents was something different. It was not rage, it was not grief, it was clarity. The particular cold, irreversible clarity that arrives when you finally see something you have always known but never been able to name. My mother had called a company to have me removed from it. She had described me to a stranger as difficult, as a problem, as someone whose presence was doing damage that needed to be managed. She had done this calmly, efficiently, without hesitation, the way she handled everything she considered a household inconvenience. She had done it because Tessa had told her a lie. And she had believed Tessa, immediately, without asking me a single question, without one moment of doubt. Because that was how it had always worked. And I had spent 31 years absorbing it and adjusting around it and telling myself it was fine and it was not fine and it had never been fine, and I was done. I was completely, finally, irreversibly done. I called Vivian first. She answered on the second ring, which told me she had been waiting. I opened it, I said.
I know.
A pause, then quietly. You've been sending me clients for 2 years.
Yes.
Without telling me.
Yes.
I exhaled slowly. Why didn't you tell me?
Because you needed to know you could do it yourself first. If I had told you from the beginning, you would have wondered always in the back of your mind how much of it was you and how much was me. Now you know, most of it was you. All of the work was you. I just made a few phone calls.
I looked at the incorporation documents on my desk, my name, my company, my 70%. Mom called the studio, I said. Silence on the line. Derek recorded it.
What did she say?
More silence then, I told her, word for word. I had already memorized the recording the way you memorize things that leave a mark, not deliberately, just inevitably, because some words burn themselves in whether you want them to or not. She's always been the difficult one. You'd be doing us all a favor. Vivian was quiet for a long moment.
Are you all right?
She finally asked. I think so. I think I'm better than all right, actually. I think I've been waiting for something to make this simple, and she just made it simple.
What are you going to do?
I looked at the 3 items spread across my desk. The letter, the documents, the index card. You built this. It belongs to you. No one can take it. Now let them see it. I'm going to let them see it, I said. I called Derek next. I told him to prepare a full company profile package, ownership documents, revenue history, client roster, press features, everything. Clean and professional, the kind of presentation we would put in front of a major client. Then I opened my laptop. I drafted an email. Not to my mother, not yet. To Paul, my father, the man who had sat at 100 dinner tables and said nothing while the person in front of him was quietly being made smaller. I wrote it carefully. I told him that I needed him to come to a family meeting, that there were things he needed to know, that I was asking once and I would not ask again. I read it back 3 times. Then I sent it. I sat back in my chair. The October light had shifted lower now, longer shadows across the floor of my office, the afternoon arriving quietly. I looked at the room around me, the shelves of project files, the mood boards pinned to the wall, the awards on the credenza, 2 regional design awards, and the Oregon Business Rising Studio recognition, framed and hung not out of vanity, but out of evidence. Proof that this was real, that I had done this, that no phone call could take it away. Something had shifted inside me that afternoon, something that would never shift back. I was not the girl on the porch anymore, waiting for a curtain to move. I was not the woman at the end of the table eating quietly while someone else took credit for her work. I was not the daughter who had spent 31 years making herself smaller so that everyone else could feel bigger. I knew exactly who I was. I knew exactly what I had built. And in a few days, so would everyone else. Let me take you back, before the meeting, before the recording, before any of it. Because the story of what happened in that conference room and what happened after only makes sense if you understand what I had built in the 3 years nobody was watching. Whitfield Creative started in a 2-room office on the 2nd floor of a converted warehouse on Northwest Quimby Street. The rent was $2,100 a month. The furniture was secondhand. 2 desks, 4 chairs, a whiteboard I bought from an office liquidation sale for $35. Derek handled the business side from a laptop in the corner. I handled everything else. Our first client came through Vivian, though I did not know it at the time. A boutique hotel group based in Bend, Oregon, 3 properties looking for a full brand identity overhaul. The project fee was $18,000. I worked on it for 6 weeks straight, most nights until past midnight, building and rebuilding the visual language until it was exactly right. When we presented the final system to the client, their director of marketing sat across the table and said, "This is the first time a studio has understood what we were actually trying to say. We got a 5-star review, we got a referral, then another. By the end of our first year, Whitfield Creative had completed 9 projects and generated $340,000 in revenue. I hired our first 2 full-time designers, recent graduates from the Pacific Northwest College of Art, who were sharp and hungry and willing to work hard for a studio that was still proving itself. By the end of our 2nd year, we had moved to a larger space, the full 3rd floor of a building on Northwest Johnson Street. 4,000 square feet, windows on 3 sides. Revenue $780,000. Staff 11 people. Client roster 14 active accounts. By the end of our third year, the year my mother made her phone call, we had moved again, this time to our own building in the Pearl District. 4 floors, 23 employees, revenue $1,200,000, 3 national brand accounts, a healthcare network rebrand that had been featured in a design industry publication as one of the top rebranding projects of the year in the Pacific Northwest. And on a Thursday morning, in September of that third year, Oregon Business Magazine published their annual Rising Companies feature. Whitfield Creative was listed as one of the top 10 creative studios to watch in the state. The article included a photograph of our team in the 4th floor studio space, 23 people standing in front of the mood wall, the one covered in years of project work and reference imagery and the particular creative energy that I had spent 3 years carefully building. I was standing slightly to the left of center in a gray blazer, my arms crossed looking directly at the camera. The caption read, Fiona Callahan, co-founder and creative director with the Whitfield Creative Team. The article was published online at 7 in the morning. By noon, it had been shared 412 times. By the following Monday, it had been shared over 8,000 times across LinkedIn design industry forums and local business networks. Renee forwarded it to the family group chat at 2:17 in the afternoon on the day it was published. I know the exact time because I have the screenshot. She had found it through a mutual acquaintance, one of Paul's business contacts, who had shared it on LinkedIn with the caption, "Great to see Portland creative businesses thriving." Renee had clicked through, read the article, and been impressed enough to share it with the family. Her message in the group chat read, "Look at this studio, so impressive. This is what real dedication looks like. Tessa, you should reach out to them. They might be a good fit for some of your agency's clients." Paul replied with a thumbs up emoji. Tessa replied, "Oh wow, they're really good. I actually recognize some of this work. Interesting." Nobody looked at the caption. Nobody read the name beneath the photograph. Nobody connected the Fiona Callahan standing in that gray blazer to the Fiona Callahan who sat at the end of their dinner table every Sunday. I read their messages sitting in my office on the 4th floor of the building they were admiring from a distance. I did not reply. Meanwhile, Tessa's career was beginning to fray. Without my work to anchor her portfolio, the quality of her output had become visibly inconsistent. She had hired a freelance designer after I stopped helping her, someone she found on a platform online, paying $200 per project, getting what she paid for. The work was generic, competent, but forgettable. Her clients noticed. The outdoor apparel rebranding project, the one she had called me about, the one that had started all of this, she had attempted on her own. The client had rejected the first 2 rounds of concepts. Her agency had brought in a senior designer to salvage it. Tessa's name was still on the account, but the credit quietly and professionally had shifted elsewhere. By November of that year, she had been passed over for the senior director promotion she had been expecting. Her boss had given the role to a colleague who, as Tessa described it to Renee in a phone call I learned about later, came out of nowhere. Renee, of course, blamed the agency. She told Paul the company didn't recognize talent. She told Tessa she was too good for them anyway. Nobody connected the timeline. Nobody noted that Tessa's most impressive work had ended abruptly at the same point I had stopped returning her calls. 2 weeks after the Oregon Business article was published, Callahan Press, my father's printing company, sent a formal request for proposal to Whitfield Creative. The project, a complete corporate rebranding. New visual identity, updated collateral system, refreshed digital presence. The stated budget, $300,000. The request came through our standard intake form on the studio website. It listed the company name, the contact person, and the project scope. The contact person was listed as Tessa Callahan, project liaison, acting on behalf of Callahan Press leadership. Derek brought it to me on a Wednesday morning with a look on his face that suggested he had already done the math.
Callahan Press. Any relation?
He said. I took the document from him. I read it carefully, top to bottom, the way I read everything. Then I set it down on my desk. My father's company, I said. Derek was quiet for a moment.
How do you want to handle it?
I looked at the request for proposal. $300,000. A project that would have been under any other circumstances exactly the kind of account we were built to take on. The scope was clear, the budget was serious, and the brand, a mid-sized printing company with 30 years of history and an outdated identity, was genuinely interesting work. But this was not any other circumstance. Schedule a preliminary meeting, I said. Standard process. Don't tell them anything about ownership until I'm in the room.
And when you're in the room...
Derek nodded slowly. I picked up the request for proposal and slid it into the project folder I had already started, the one sitting on the corner of my desk next to Vivian's letter, next to the incorporation documents, next to the index card that said, "Now let them see it." "Then they'll see it," I said. That meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at 10 in the morning. I had exactly 1 week to prepare for the moment my family walked into my building and finally understood what I had been doing while they were not watching. 1 week, and I intended to use every hour of it. The week before the meeting, I did not sleep well. Not because I was nervous, I want to be clear about that. What kept me awake was not anxiety, it was the strange, disorienting experience of watching something you have been building for 3 years finally arrive at the moment it was always moving toward. It is like standing at the edge of a very long road you have been walking alone and realizing for the first time that you have reached the other side. I spent that week preparing with the same methodical care I gave to every major client presentation. I pulled together the full company profile Derek had assembled, ownership documents, revenue history across 3 years, our complete client roster, every press mention, every award. I had our studio photographer reprint 3 of our most significant project case studies in large format for the conference room wall. I reviewed the Callahan Press brand materials that had come through with their request for proposal, their existing logo, their collateral, their website, and I developed a preliminary brand analysis that demonstrated clearly and professionally exactly what we could do for them. I was going to walk into that meeting as a business owner, as a creative director, as the person who ran this company. I was not going to walk in as a daughter. Thursday arrived cold and bright. One of those sharp November mornings in Portland where the sky is completely clear and the light has a quality that makes everything look more defined than usual, edges, crisper shadows, longer colors, more saturated. I was at the studio by 7 in the morning. I reviewed the conference room setup twice. I made sure the case studies were hung correctly. I made sure the water glasses were filled and the presentation was loaded on the screen. At 9:58, Derek appeared in my office doorway.
"They're in the elevator,"
he said. I nodded. I straightened my jacket, the same gray blazer from the Oregon business photograph, which I had chosen deliberately, and I picked up my folder and walked to the conference room. I stood just inside the doorway to the left of the entrance so that I would not be visible from the hallway until they were fully inside the room. I heard the elevator open, footsteps on the polished concrete floor of our reception area, the low murmur of Derek greeting them, showing them in. A woman's voice. Tessa's saying something about the building being nicer than she expected. A man's voice. Paul's asking about parking validation. Ordinary sounds. Unremarkable. The sounds of 2 people walking into a meeting they thought they understood. The conference room door opened. Tessa entered first. She was wearing a burgundy coat and carrying a leather portfolio that I recognized as the one Renee had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. She was looking down at her phone as she walked in, finishing a message, the practiced half attention of someone who moves through professional spaces with confidence because they have never had reason to feel unwelcome in them. Then she looked up. She saw the case studies on the wall first. 3 large format prints the hotel group rebrand the healthcare network identity, the retail brand campaign. She had seen all of these before. Not in this room, not framed and mounted like this, but she had seen them. On my laptop screen, in the files I had sent her, in the work she had absorbed into her own portfolio and presented as her own at a Christmas dinner 3 years ago while I sat at the other end of the table and said nothing. I watched her face change. It was not a dramatic change. It was subtle, a slight stilling around the eyes, a fractional tightening at the corners of her mouth. The change of someone who has just recognized something they were not expecting to see and is rapidly trying to process what that recognition means. Paul stepped in behind her. He was wearing his gray blazer, his not mine, and carrying a manila folder with the Callahan Press letterhead visible on the top page. He looked older than I had been registering at Sunday dinners. There were more lines around his eyes. His hair had gone fully gray at the temples. He looked at the room. He looked at the case studies. He looked at Derek, who had taken his position at the far end of the table with the professional composure of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen and had decided to let it unfold at its own pace. Then he looked at me. I stepped fully into the room. "Hello, Dad," I said. "Hello, Tessa. Welcome to Whitfield Creative." The room went very quiet. Not the polite quiet of a meeting about to begin. The absolute quiet of a moment in which everyone present understands simultaneously that they are no longer in the situation they thought they were in. Paul's manila folder slid from the table. It hit the floor and fanned open Callahan Press letterhead, spreading across the polished concrete like a slow exhale. He did not move to pick it up. Tessa's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Nothing came out. I walked to the head of the table, my table in my conference room on the 4th floor of my building, and I set down my folder, and I looked at them both with the particular steadiness that comes not from rehearsal, but from having waited a very long time for a moment and finally being inside it. "Please sit down," I said. "There's a lot to cover." They sat. Derek remained at the far end of the table. He did not speak. He did not need to. I opened my folder and placed the company profile in front of each of them, the ownership documents, the revenue history, the client roster, the press features. I placed the Oregon business article last face-up photograph visible, the one Renee had forwarded to the family group chat 6 weeks earlier with the message, "This is what real dedication looks like." Paul looked at the article for a long time. I watched him recognize the photograph, watched him recognize the gray blazer, watched him read the caption beneath it, Fiona Callahan, co-founder and creative director, and then look up at me and then look back down at the caption as if reading it a second time might change what it said. It did not change.
You own this company.
He said. It was not a question. It was a man doing arithmetic in public visibly, each number landing with its full weight. 70% for 3 years. Tessa had not spoken. She was staring at the case studies on the wall, the hotel group, rebrand, the healthcare network, the retail campaign. Her face had gone through several expressions in the past 4 minutes. Shock, then calculation, then something that looked briefly like shame before settling into the particular blankness of someone who's trying very hard to give nothing away.
The design work in my portfolio, the projects I presented at Christmas, the pitch decks.
She said finally. Her voice was careful, measured. Yes. 1 word. I did not elaborate. I did not need to. Paul looked at Tessa, then at me, then back at Tessa. I watched something happen in his face. In that moment, something I had not seen there before in 31 years of looking at it across dinner tables and living rooms and the front seat of his car. It was not anger. It was not surprise exactly. It was the expression of a man who has been telling himself a particular story for a very long time and has just been handed evidence that the story was wrong. He said nothing, but the look on his face said everything I had spent my entire childhood waiting for. "The request for proposal you submitted." I said, bringing the meeting back to its surface purpose because I was running this meeting and I would decide when it moved and where it went. $300,000 for a full corporate rebranding. I've reviewed your existing brand materials. I slid the preliminary analysis across the table. We can do this work. We are the right studio for it. But before we discuss the project, there are some things I need you to understand about how I run this company, and about what I will and will not accept in a working relationship.
What kind of things?
Paul asked. His jaw was tight. His hands folded on the table were very still. Tessa had still not looked away from the case studies on the wall. I folded my hands in front of me on the table. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of my 4th floor conference room, Portland moved through its Thursday morning indifferent and alive, the way cities do. "Let me start from the beginning," I said. And I did. I told them everything. Not with anger, not with tears. With the same calm, methodical precision I used when presenting to any client, because that is what this was at its core. A presentation. Evidence organized, sequenced, and delivered with clarity. I started with the 11 projects. I opened my folder and placed the notebook page in front of them, the one I had kept for 3 years, dates and project names and hours and dollar amounts written in my own handwriting. 134 hours, $0, 0 credit. Each entry dated each project, named each client identifiable. Tessa looked at the notebook page for a long time without speaking. Paul looked at it too. His jaw worked slightly the way it did when he was processing something he did not want to process. "I kept records," I said. "From the beginning. Not because I planned to use them, just because I always knew on some level that documentation was the only currency that couldn't be taken from me." I moved to the portfolio. I had printed Tessa's LinkedIn profile, the version from 3 weeks prior, before she had begun quietly removing things. 7 projects listed under her name, 5 of them mine. I placed the printout beside the notebook page. Then I placed the Oregon business article beside that. Then I placed the incorporation documents beside that. Then I placed the transcript of Renee's phone call. Derek had typed it up, verbatim, every word time-stamped in the center of the table, where both of them could read it without picking it up. "She's always been the difficult one in our family. You'd be doing us all a favor." Paul read it once. He did not look up immediately. He stared at the transcript for what felt like a very long time, and I watched the color in his face change in the way that color changes in someone who is realizing, with full and irreversible clarity, that silence has a cost. That it had always had a cost. That he had been paying it quietly for 31 years while someone else carried the bill. Tessa pushed the transcript slightly to the side, the small physical gesture of someone trying to create distance from something incriminating.
Mom was worried about you.
She said. Her voice had recovered some of its steadiness.
She heard something and she reacted. That's what she does.
She heard something from you, I said. Tessa's eyes met mine.
I was concerned.
You invented a story about me and a married colleague, and you told our mother, I said. You told her because I had just refused to do your work for you for the first time in 3 years. That is not concern, Tessa. That is retaliation. The room was very quiet. Tessa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again.
You don't know that.
The timeline is in that folder, I said. Your call to me at 7:11 in the evening, my refusal, your call to Mom, which she made to the studio at 7:42, 31 minutes, it's all documented. She looked at the folder. She did not pick it up. Paul set down the transcript. He looked at me across the conference table, really looked at me the way he had not looked at me in the kitchen when I told him about my scholarship, the way he had not looked at me at the dinner table when I sat in silence while Tessa presented my work as hers. He looked at me the way a person looks at someone they're seeing clearly for the first time after a very long period of voluntary blindness.
Fiona,
He said. His voice was different, lower. Something had gone out of it, the careful neutrality he had maintained for decades, the studied uninvolvement that had allowed him to be in the same rooms as all of these things, without ever being responsible for any of them. I'm not finished, I said, not unkindly, but firmly. I moved to the final piece. I had not planned this part originally. It had come to me the night before at 2 a.m, lying awake in my apartment, listening to the rain. It was not in Derek's company profile package. It was not a legal document or a press feature or a timeline of events. It was a single photograph. I placed it in front of Paul. It was a scan Vivian had sent it to me the previous week when I called her to tell her about the meeting. A scan of the drawing I had made when I was 9 years old on a yellow legal pad in Paul's home office. The house on Birchwood Drive, every window, the crooked mailbox, the oak tree in the front yard. The drawing Vivian had quietly asked to keep and had framed and hung in her hallway in Seattle for 22 years. Paul looked at it for a long time.
I remember this.
When he spoke, his voice was not steady. Vivian kept it, I said. She's had it on her wall since I was 9. She drove to Eugene for my graduation when no one else came. She invested $50,000 in this company because she believed in me when no one else did. I paused. She was the only person in this family who ever acted like my future was worth something. The silence that followed was the longest of the entire meeting. Then I addressed the boundaries. I told them clearly, without raising my voice, what I had decided. First, Tessa would remove every piece of work I had created from her professional portfolio within 7 days. Not just LinkedIn, every platform, every agency submission, every document where my designs appeared under her name. I had a complete inventory. Derek would follow up in writing. Second, I would not be working with Callahan Press on the rebranding project. Not because I couldn't. We were the right studio for it and I knew it. But because I had not yet determined whether a working relationship with Paul's company was something I wanted to build. That decision would take time and it would be mine alone to make.
You're turning down $300,000.
Paul said. Not as a challenge. More as a man trying to understand the dimensions of what he was looking at. I'm protecting my company, I said. The same way I've been protecting it for 3 years. By being very careful about who I let inside it. Paul nodded slowly. He did not argue. Third, and this was the part I had thought about most carefully, I told them that I would be going to see Renee, not today, not this week, but soon, and I would be bringing the recording, not to punish her. But because I was done being discussed in rooms I wasn't in, I was done being managed, I was done being the problem that got quietly handled by phone calls to people who I turned out to own.
She won't take it well,
Tessa said. I know, I said. I'm not going for her comfort, I'm going for mine. Then something happened that I had not planned for. Paul stood up. Not to leave. He stood and he looked at me across the conference table with 23 employees worth of work on the walls around us and 31 years of silence between us, and he said in a voice that had something broken in it. Not dramatically, not theatrically, but genuinely and quietly. Broken the way things break when they have been under pressure for a very long time.
I should have said something. A long time ago, I saw what was happening, and I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, and
He stopped, started again.
I'm sorry, Fiona. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it's too late for most of it, but I am sorry.
I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the boy who had built Callahan Press from nothing, the man in the gray blazer who smelled like ink and coffee, the father who had looked at me across the dinner table when I was 17, the night Renee threw a party for Tessa's nomination and held my eyes for just 1 second before looking away. He had known. He had always known. I know you are, I said. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That was a decision for another day in another room when I had more distance from this one. But it was true, and in that moment truth was enough. Tessa left without speaking. She picked up her leather portfolio and her burgundy coat, and she walked out of the conference room and through the reception area and into the elevator without looking back. I watched her go through the glass wall. I watched the elevator doors close. Paul gathered his fallen folder from the floor. He straightened the Callahan Press letterhead. He looked at the photograph of the house on Birchwood Drive one more time, the 9-year-old's drawing, precise and careful and full of a child's complete attention to the world she lived in. Then he set it down gently on the table, as if it were something worth being careful with. He left quietly. I stood alone in my conference room on the 4th floor of my building and looked out at Portland in the late morning light and felt for the first time in 31 years that I was not asking for anything. Not asking to be seen, not asking to be believed, not asking for credit or acknowledgement or a seat at a table that had never fully been mine. I was not asking for permission to exist. I was done asking. 6 months have passed since that Thursday morning in November. I want to tell you what my life looks like now. Not because I need you to know how the story ends. Stories like this one don't end exactly, they just change shape. But because I spent so many years not being able to picture a future that belonged to me. And I think there is something worth saying about what it feels like when you finally can. Whitfield Creative signed its largest contract in January. A national retail chain, 47 locations across 12 states, commissioned a complete brand identity overhaul. The project fee was $450,000. We brought on 3 additional designers for the scope. The work is some of the best the studio has produced. I sat in my corner office the morning the contract was signed and thought about the yellow legal pad, the secondhand Dell laptop, the $40 design class, the scholarship certificate I had hidden in the bottom drawer of my childhood desk because there was no one to celebrate it with. I thought about all the hours I had spent building things quietly in the margins of a life that kept telling me I was not the main story. I was always the main story. I just had to wait long enough to be the one telling it. I went to see Renee on a Saturday morning in December, 3 weeks after the conference room meeting. I drove to the house on Birchwood Drive alone. I did not call ahead. I parked in the driveway and sat in my car for 4 minutes, not from hesitation, just from the particular discipline of someone who has learned to arrive at difficult things at their own pace. Renee answered the door in her bathrobe. She had not been expecting me. Her face cycled through several expressions, very quickly surprise, then a careful reassembly into the composed managing expression I had watched her wear my entire life. The expression that said, whatever this is, I can handle it. I have always handled things.
Fiona,
She said.
this is unexpected.
I know, I said. Can I come in? She stepped back. I walked into the house on Birchwood Drive, for the first time in 6 months, past the spotless kitchen, past the living room with its perfect furniture and its photographs of Tessa on every surface, past the hallway where my childhood bedroom door was closed as it had been for years, as if the room inside it had been quietly retired from use the moment I left. We sat at the kitchen table. I placed Derek's transcript on the table between us. Renee looked at it without touching it. She recognized what it was. Immediately I could tell by the way her chin lifted slightly, the micro-adjustment of someone preparing a defense. I want you to hear the recording, I said. I placed my phone on the table and pressed play. Her own voice filled the kitchen. She's always been the difficult one in our family. You'd be doing us all a favor. The recording ran its full 6 minutes and 14 seconds. I did not watch Renee while it played. I looked at my hands on the table. I listened to every word the way I had listened to it dozens of times since Derek had sent me the file, not to hurt myself with it, but to make sure I never forgot exactly what had been said. Exactly what I was worth in the accounting of the woman who had raised me. When it finished, the kitchen was completely silent. Outside, a car passed on Birchwood Drive. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The refrigerator hummed its low, constant note. The same sound it had made my entire childhood the background frequency of this house. This family, This particular version of being alive that I had spent 31 years navigating. Renee's hands were folded on the table. Her nails were perfect, as always. Her posture was straight.
That was a private conversation.
She said. You called a business line, I said. Nothing about it was private.
I was trying to protect you from yourself, from the situation you were creating.
I looked at her. There was no situation. There was no married colleague. There was no scandal. There was Tessa, who was angry that I had stopped doing her work for her, and there was you, who believed whatever Tessa told you without asking me a single question. Renee's mouth tightened.
You don't understand the pressure Tessa is under.
I understand it very well, I said. I've been carrying part of it for 3 years. She stopped. I had promised myself I would not raise my voice. I did not raise my voice. I had also promised myself I would say everything I had come to say, not for her benefit, not to change her, not because I believed this conversation would transform her into someone different. I had come because I was done being the person in this family who absorbed everything in silence. I had come because I needed her to know that I knew, that I had always known, and that I was no longer willing to pretend otherwise. I told her about the scholarship she had not celebrated, the graduation she had not attended, the Christmas dinner where she had praised Tessa's portfolio without knowing it was mine. I told her about 134 hours of work given freely to a sister who had never once said thank you. I told her about building a company for 3 years in the margins of a life she had never taken seriously, and about the moment her own voice on a recording had made everything simple. I didn't cry. I had nothing left to cry about. I had cried it all out years ago in private, in the quiet spaces between all the things this family had never seen fit to give me. Renee listened. Her expression moved through several things: defensiveness, then a brief, uncomfortable flash of something that might have been recognition, then back to the careful composure she wore like armor.
I always wanted what was best for you.
When I finished, she said. I looked at her for a long moment. I know you believe that, I said. I also know it isn't true. I stood up. I picked up my phone and the transcript. I pushed in my chair. I'm not ending our relationship, I said. But I'm changing it. I won't be coming to Sunday dinners. I won't be available to manage family dynamics or absorb whatever Tessa needs redirected. If you want to see me, you can call me directly and we can find a time, on my terms, at my pace. Renee looked up at me from the kitchen table. In the morning light, she looked smaller than I had ever seen her, not physically, but in some other way that I didn't have a precise word for. The way something looks when the authority it had over you has finally and completely dissolved.
You're punishing me,
she said. I am protecting myself, I said. There's a difference. I walked out of the kitchen, down the hallway, past the closed door of my childhood bedroom, through the front door and down the porch steps and across the driveway to my car. I did not look back. Tessa removed the portfolio within 5 days. No message, no apology. Just a LinkedIn notification that she had updated her profile, which Derek confirmed against our inventory. Every project gone. A former client of Tessa's, the outdoor apparel brand from Bend, reached out to Whitfield Creative directly in January. They had seen our Oregon business feature. They asked if we were available to discuss a full brand identity project. We were. Paul calls me occasionally now, not often. Once every few weeks on Sunday evenings, brief calls that are still figuring out what they want to be. He asks about the studio. I tell him. He tells me about Callahan Press. I listen. There are long pauses that neither of us fills with the wrong things anymore. It is not the relationship I needed when I was 9 years old, on the floor of his home office with a yellow legal pad. It is not the relationship I needed at 17 or 22 or 25. But I am 31 now. And I have learned in the careful, expensive way that people learn the things that matter most, that you cannot collect old debts from people who never had the currency to pay them. You can only decide what you're owed going forward, and by whom. Vivian and I have dinner every Sunday evening now. Sometimes at her house in Seattle, sometimes at a restaurant in Portland's Pearl District. There is a small Italian place 2 blocks from the studio that has become our regular table in the back corner by the window where we can see the street. She's 71 years old and she laughs easily, and she always orders the same thing, and she asks about the studio with the particular interest of someone who has watched something grow from nothing and still finds it remarkable. Last Sunday she asked me how I was, not about work, not about Renee or Tessa or Paul. Just how are you? I thought about it for a genuine moment. The studio, the contract, the team of 26 people who show up every morning to build things inside walls I own. The corner office with the view of Portland. The photograph of the house on Birchwood Drive, Framed now on my own wall, a gift from Vivian, a 9-year-old's complete and careful attention to the world she lived in before the world had taught her to make herself smaller. "I'm good," I said, and for the first time in my life, I meant it without qualification. Without the silent asterisk, without the footnote that said except for this, except for them, except for the part of me that is still waiting to be enough. I was enough. I had always been enough. I just finally, completely and without apology, believed it. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to someone who underestimated you is simply keep going, keep building, keep showing up. Not for them, never for them, for the version of yourself that deserved better and decided to create it anyway. My mother thought she was making a phone call. She was actually closing a door she never knew was open. If you've ever been the one they forgot to believe in, this story was for you. Thank you for watching until the very end. If something here stayed with you, hit that like button and consider subscribing, but only if this is genuinely the kind of story you want more of. I'd love to know, was there ever a moment in your life when someone underestimated you and you let your work speak louder than any argument ever could? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're ready for another story, there's one waiting for you in the description right now. Take care of yourself. You've earned it.